Good morning, and welcome to the First Unitarian Church, and welcome you guys. How wonderful to have you in church. It's great to see you. Hi. So listen, we're gonna talk just a little bit this morning about a subject that we're going to tackle later on when you go to your Sunday schools and have fun. We're going to be here sweating it out, trying really hard to figure out this thing called forgiveness. Do you guys know what forgiveness is? Okay, give me an idea. What's forgiveness?
Forgiveness is where, like, somebody accidentally broke your action figure and you with the heart of mind.
Okay. Somebody accidentally breaks your action figure and you go, you're forgiven. Wow. Have you thought of the ministry? Anybody have a different idea about forgiveness? Is that? Yeah, one more, yeah. Yeah. Okay. So let me ask you this. Is forgiveness, giving forgiveness, is that easy or is that a hard thing to do? Some say hard, some say easy. What do you think? Is it easy or hard? You think it's easy? Okay. Well, let's take the action figure. Let's take the action figure, okay? It's your favorite action figure, okay? And somebody comes along and is a little careless and steps on it and breaks it. And then that person says to you, "Oh, will you forgive me?" But what's happening inside of you? That's your favorite action figure. It is in pieces. What are you feeling? You're feeling a little angry? You feel angry when people wreck your stuff. That's right. And sad. And so you're feeling angry. You're feeling sad. And then somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, will you forgive me?" What are you going to say? You're going to say yes. And why do you say yes? Because it's not nice to say no. It's not nice not to forgive somebody, so you forgive them. Okay, great. And what about the other way around? What about, you're kind of absent-minded and you're at a friend's house and you step on her favorite action figure and it's in pieces. How do you feel when you do that? How does that feel? Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. How do you feel? So you accidentally break someone's action figure. How does that make you feel? It makes you feel sad. And what do you want to see happen? Do you go then to the person and say, "Gee, will you forgive me?" Okay, will you forgive me? And if the person says, "I forgive you," does that make you feel a lot better? Makes you feel better than if she said, "I will not forgive you"? That's kind of hard, isn't it? I will not forgive you. But it just makes, and then after you are forgiven, then you can be friends again, right? Because the damage is done, you talked about it, you showed your regrets, said you were sorry, and you were forgiven. Okay. But you... Could you say that again, please?
She could, use her own money and, buy the same action.
Okay. So you're saying, see, that's why forgiveness is not always that easy. You're saying, "I'll forgive you if you buy me a new action figure." Is that what you're saying? That's what I understood you to say, and that's the inclination, yeah. One more comment, yes. No, okay. That's always kind of tricky. And we're going to be actually talking about what's called negative reciprocity, figuring out a way to make it really more just. And maybe it's a good idea to say, well, I'll forgive you if you buy me a new action figure. Oh, that'll make me feel a lot better. And it'll make you feel a lot better, too. It's stuff to think about. It's a difficult subject. Right now, we want to light the chalice, and we're going to ask, I forgot the name of your boys. Right. Kai and Max. And bring your parents up, too. We're going to light the chalice.
Symbol of light, symbol of knowledge, symbol of warmth, symbol of freedom. We light this chalice as a symbol of our faith. Here we gather to celebrate hope and the infinite possibilities of love.
Kai, thank you very much. All right. So let's open up our service, turning our hymn books, please, to number 123, Spirit of Life.
I don't know about you, but there were some days this week when I thought my phone might be malfunctioning. So many pings, dings, and beeps. Urgent! Breaking news! Now this! So many occasions to be anxious. So much change in what could be just a matter of hours. All of it top priority. Meanwhile, for all of us, the daily rounds continue. To-do lists getting longer, even if as we cross off the tasks, more people needing things from us, trying to remember that critical thing that must be picked up on the way home, or sadly, remembering too late, checking all those messages, returning the critical ones, hoping a less urgent request can wait till tomorrow. But for some of us, urgent, life-changing things that don't come with a bing or a peep, or a ping or a beep. An uncertain diagnosis, an unpleasant conversation, an untenable situation. The pings and dings and beeps can sometimes be a cacophony that overlays the deep dissonance of ordinary life, and the noise can be overwhelming. While all along, the breeze is getting cooler outside your window, the light sparkles in the grass. The trees are heaving deep sighs. They're tired, and they're giving it one last breath before they let go. We could let go too. Maybe not let go of everything all at once, but we could stand still for a moment in the breeze and let it catch our hair and make us pull our sweaters closed against it. We could watch the leaves fall and know that things are still going to go on, even if the to-do list remains unfinished, even if we have to make dinner without that crucial ingredient. We can rest for one moment in this season. We can curve our faces into smiles. We can feel the love that holds all things, and we can be grateful to be a part of it all. We can look around and see someone near us whose fuse seems a little too short, whose steps are too mechanical, who maybe hasn't had a hug or a kind word or a glass of water in a while. We can pull them close and remind them that they too are part of this love that is holding us. The gift of this moment is the letting go and the holding on, the way they dance together. Thank you, Spirit, for this dance.
Now, the subject of forgiveness did not just end with Scripture a few thousand years ago, which certainly recommended forgiveness in a big way. People have been thinking about it. Social sciences have been grappling with it. It is an enormously complex field, and we're just going to maybe just make a little dent in the subject this morning. And to kind of grease the wheel, we've got this reading by Anthony Lopez, Why Evolution Made Forgiveness Difficult. He is a professor at Washington State University, and he teaches political psychology. I bet he's having a lot of fun these days. So he introduces this idea of negative reciprocity, which is really kind of what one of the youngsters said this morning. It'll be a lot easier to forgive if you buy me another toy. That'll make it easier. And so it's of course it gets a lot more complicated than that. But after the 9 o'clock service, the one word that everybody was saying was "but." Forgiveness, but. There's so many layers of complexity. Nature endowed humanity with both revenge and forgiveness as tools of conflict resolution. But why does one seem so much harder than the other? If you're like most people, the very thought of forgiving an enemy probably makes you feel uneasy. This doesn't make you a bad person, it just makes you human. Forgiveness is emotionally difficult because evolution has endowed us with the psychological motivation to avoid being exploited by others, and the easiest way to prevent exploitation is to hit back or simply avoid the exploiter. Therefore, any discussion of forgiveness must begin by understanding that the urge to retaliate, is very deeply rooted in evolutionary history. In fact, direct retaliatory violence is perhaps nature's most reliable conflict resolution mechanism. It evens the score, doesn't it? It evens the score by reversing any gains that might be had by the aggressor. But not all forms of retaliation are the same. Although revenge is often informally used to describe any form of retaliation, it is in fact one extreme form of it. Nature has provided us with an alternative to revenge that researchers call negative reciprocity, and that is what opens the door to forgiveness. Revenge is meant to cause suffering for its own sake, and it tends to be out of proportion with the initial wrongdoing. This form of retaliation is uniquely motivated by hatred and the idea that another's existence and well-being will cause harm. There is a perception that the very existence of some individual or group is an imminent threat to your life. The role of hate is important here and is meant as an explicit contrast with anger. Hate is triggered in part by a belief that an outgroup is actually unable to change their villainous ways, and revenge is driven by the perception, real or not, of the implacable foe, the maniacal menace whose mind cannot be turned and whose behavior cannot be stopped. Yet, disproportional acts of hateful violence are not always one's immediate reaction to perceived injustice. We are often angry, yet not hateful. And I think that's a real important distinction. We're often angry, yet not hateful. We often seek punishment short of the complete eradication of a rival. And this leads us into negative reciprocity. The label itself conveys an exchange of costs takes place. You harm me, and I respond with an equivalent and proportionate harm. Unlike revenge, Negative reciprocity is a relatively proportional response meant to change the mind of the target, not obliterate it. Thus, negative reciprocity holds the promise of restoring or building a cooperative relationship. It is an evolved strategy meant to achieve a delicate balancing act. It seeks to end unjust or apparently inequitable behavior while repairing a cooperative relationship with the one who has wronged you. We are social organisms. That means we are particularly vulnerable to exploitation, but it also means that we depend heavily on others for valuable cooperative opportunities. Okay, our announcements this morning will begin with a questionnaire. Anybody here would like to see the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment? Is there anybody? Okay. Is there anybody here who does not want to see the? Anybody here would like very much for the state of Utah to be the 38th state to ratify the ERA and add it to the add it as an amendment to the Constitution? Would you like to see Utah be the? Now, how many of you feel that our legislators are doing everything possible to pass the Equal Rights Amendment? Well, we have an opportunity to change that. We've got people here who really want to see the passage of the Equal Rights Amendment and feel that our legislators may need a little help in coming to that point. And so they are here to collect signatures. And so these are signatures that will be sent to our legislators to kind of get with the program this year, 2019. 2020, of course, will mark the 100th anniversary of women's suffrage. So, so let's get to it. Look for the table, sign the form, sign the petition, and let's hope the Equal Rights Amendment will indeed pass. A couple of other announcements. One is, oh my goodness, I've got a million. I guess church must be in full swing. I got a million announcements. Let me just kind of break it down, just a couple. Following our service today at about 12:45, Monica will start her adult ed series called Beyond Inquiry. So we have, various stages. We have kind of an easygoing orientation for people who are new, and then to take it a step deeper, there will be 5 programs that will be run about one a month, and we're starting today. And be sure to join her up in the Haven. And if you don't know where the Haven is, ask anybody or ask me. I'll show you how to get there. So that'll be the start of Beyond Inquiry to get a better feel for UU history and theology and this church as well. Tomorrow will be Monday night, family fun night. Those of you with younger children, probably 5th and 6th grade down, please join for a fun evening of breaking bread together, programs for the kids and for the adults. Take a look more in your order of service, as well as make note that on October 21st there will be a new family dinner. That's going to be sponsored by Religious Education. Take a look at how to RSVP for that one. Let me say that one of the highlights of the church year, no, not one of the, it is the highlight, I think, of the church year, is the auction. The auction, yeah, in one sense, you know, it is the biggest fundraiser for the church. But if we look at it in a larger piece, it is one fun social event, and it's almost a byproduct that the church is able to get some resources to help it going. So the auction will be 4 weeks from today, November 2nd, but tickets are available now, and there's a chance to buy tickets and take a look at some of the drawings and get some tickets for those. And so please, let's do what we need to do, and that is support the auction. And it is an auction for everyone. Yes, it is a fundraiser, but everyone, we want to include everyone in this church community as part of that major event, which will take place at the Marriott Hotel in Research Park. Wonderful dinner and a lot of fun and socializing. And so if the $75 ticket poses a problem for you, no worries. You can talk to the people selling tickets. You can talk to me, whatever is easiest. And we really, sincerely want everyone to be there, because it really is a highlight of the church year. And yeah, it'll be just great to have everybody there. This church community does more than just party together. We also are about standing with each other and supporting one another during hard times. And it was during this past week that Linda Waters lost her daughter, and we stand with her in great love and embrace her and Linda's mother as well. Her daughter Danielle, affectionately known as Mo. These flowers are for her. They're in her memory. And she had a favorite piece of music. During the offering, David just plays That Thing, which he does every Sunday. But rather than playing That Thing, today he's going to play a piece by Bob Marley. And it's one of Mo's favorite pieces called Every Little Thing Is Going to Be All Right. We can still continue greeting each other and chatting with each other and bidding each other a good day. And Linda said, if people really want to get up and dance, that's okay too. So the offering will now gratefully be received, and a chance to think about Linda, her family, and listen to Bob Marley's tune. regardless of your religion or non-religion, independent of your private beliefs or non-beliefs, we all struggle with the concept of forgiveness. It's about as weighty a subject as anyone tackles in a lifetime. Our reading this morning gave us a helpful platform, I believe, in starting to look at forgiveness not merely as a kind, benign gesture or even a bold and courageous act, but framing forgiveness as a possible tool for conflict resolution. Because what lies at the bottom of all this is conflict. Now, I like this framework because it takes forgiveness out of its usual religious perspective by giving it a wider application than religious exhortations to forgive. We're finally coming to understand the psychological factors when we puzzle through how best to deal with someone who has harmed us. Now, whether you offer forgiveness or not, you need to understand that, there is a conflict somehow that needs to be resolved. And we need to also understand our own motivations. Namely, are we coming at this forgiveness thing from a position of anger or even, an extreme level, hate? Our human instincts for revenge sit pretty close to the surface. Survival of the fittest and all that. Forgiveness is simply not in the human DNA, but we're also smart enough to realize that taking a club to beat up the guy in the cave next door to ours doesn't exactly solve the problem either. When we take a moment to reflect on the power of forgiveness, and it really is an extraordinarily powerful act. So when we think about the power of forgiveness, it almost has a unique place. It's almost like there's a superhuman feeling about it. It's not easily accessible in our human toolkit. Yet sometimes it occurs to us that forgiveness is a better alternative to retaliation. The conflict will likely end in forgiveness, not escalate further if we just forgive. Now, what is drummed into us, at least in our Western culture, is that forgiveness is, in fact, a moral virtue. Because of our human flaws, we can't always avoid harming others. A virtuous person, however, will reduce the conflict by not surrendering to this gut instinct of doing harm in return. Forgiveness, inextricably tied to religious injunctions about best practices going forward, has become an expectation among those who lead a religious life. It's become an expectation even for many who don't particularly lead a religious life. It's an expectation. Now, on Tuesday, Jews around the world will observe Yom Kippur. It's the highest holy day of the year, with the role of forgiveness serving as its centerpiece. Now, one doesn't need to be Jewish to understand the gist of why this holy day remains so important even in today's modern world. Yom Kippur follows on the heels of Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. Now, according to Jewish tradition, the New Year is when God inscribes each person's fate for the coming year into a book, the book of life. Then you've got a couple of days until Yom Kippur before your fate is sealed. So you scramble around a lot, trying to get this thing right. And so you got this leeway before God's judgment against you becomes a permanent verdict. Now, one does not need to be Jewish to relate to life as though it were a book in which one's actions are writ large. We often, contemplate life as a series of chapters. It's a book, if you will. And if we're honest and we look at the book of life, well, some chapters read better than others. But the image of a book of life resonates. And how often do we hear, especially among the older set, how often do we hear them say, well, I've got one more chapter to write before it's all over. And I want to make sure it's a really good chapter. Now, for some, it may be a stretch to think about God judging you and writing comments in the margin of your life's book. You may say it just isn't fair because we don't even have a chance to look over his shoulders to see what he's jotting down in the margins. But we know the expectations: to seek atonement from God for our trespasses against others. Did we trespass against others? Why, yes. It's a given. We're only human, and we make countless mistakes, many of them hurtful to others. On Yom Kippur, Jews seek forgiveness for wrongs done against God and against other human beings. It's going back to a time where there's no such thing as negative reciprocity. You don't negotiate, proportional harm. God thinks this is nonsense. No, you just forgive. That's the way it's done. And so in the evening and day of Yom Kippur, night and day, so that is set aside for public and private petitions and confessions of guilt. And at the end of Yom Kippur, one hopes, very much so, to have been forgiven by God, and we hope to be forgiven by all whom we have harmed. So if you stand back and kind of give it a little bit of an analytical view, religion takes a very clever approach. It seems that God has discerned a long time ago that whenever there is conflict, only two alternatives exist: exact revenge, seek forgiveness. Now, obviously, God thinks forgiveness is the preferred course of action. Christianity has a pretty large stake in the business of forgiveness as well. It kind of follows the same principle found in the Hebrew Bible. Now, in the Gospel of Matthew, for example, you read, "If you forgive others for their transgressions, your heavenly Father will also forgive you. But if you do not forgive others, then your Father will not forgive your transgression." It sounds like the popular phrase we hear a lot these days. It sounds like a quid pro quo, doesn't it? I'll do you a favor, God, and you do me a favor, though. To make sure we really get it, Jesus tells the following story. One who owed him 10,000 talents was brought to him, but since he did not have the means to repay, his Lord commanded him to be sold along with his wife and children and all that he had, and repayment to be made. So the slave fell to the ground and prostrated himself before him, saying, "Have patience with me, and I'll repay you everything." And the Lord of that slave felt compassion and released him and forgave him the debt. But that slave went out and found one of his fellow slaves who owed him 100 denarii and seized him and began to choke him, saying, "Pay back what you owe." So this fellow slave fell to the ground and began to plead with him, saying, "Have patience with me, and I will repay you." he was unwilling and went and threw him in prison until he should pay back what was owed. So when his fellow slaves saw what had happened, they were deeply grieved and came and reported to their Lord all that had happened. Then summoning him, his Lord said to him, "You wicked slave, I forgave you all that debt because you pleaded with me. Should you not also have mercy on your fellow slave in the same way that I had mercy upon you?" So the message clearly tells us that a lack of forgiveness is a sign that a person will not receive God's mercy or God's grace. The quid pro quo in religious jargon is relentless. And we'll see in the Epistle of James, there's a statement that aligns nicely with Yom Kippur. Judgment is without mercy to one who shows no mercy. And in the Beatitudes, we hear Jesus say, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." The meaning is obvious. A merciless person will have to deal with a merciless God. Show mercy, or external life will be unsettling. So let's move into a more contemporary framework, all the work that's been done on this topic of forgiveness. And the consensus is that if we're really honest, sometimes it's really hard to be honest about this. If you're honest about forgiveness, the reasons in its favor are really variations of two themes. One, it is expected of me. Two, it shows that I am the better person. Well, do these reasons for forgiveness carry merit in cases when one has been irreparably and tragically wronged by another? It bears asking, who benefits from my forgiveness? Think about it. Who benefits from my forgiveness? What does being the better person have to do with my loss? Well, that cuts right to the chase. After thousands of years of religious indoctrination that forgiveness is a righteous and virtuous path, and forgiveness is fundamentally a religious expectation, there's now a little pushback by those who look at forgiveness not through the lens of religion, but with more of an objective eye towards what is really gained by forgiveness if you drop God's mercy from the equation. In fact, it was Nietzsche who claimed that sentimental ideas, what a quote, sentimental ideas like forgiveness were instilled by powerful ideologues who wanted, what do they think this was a good idea? Because they wanted to maintain power. Well, how does that work? When I think about domestic abuse cases, there's nothing to be gained by a woman forgiving a violent husband other than the church's continued desire to subordinate women. And as we know, that is sadly the advice given to many women by their pastors. To be virtuous in forgiveness, let the transgressions pass. Many were shocked a few days ago when the brother of a black man killed in his own apartment by a white policewoman, and this brother ran to the woman and hugged her right after she was sentenced to 10 years in prison and offered her forgiveness. Recall that? I can't help but wonder about his motivation. Now, many people say that forgiveness, they say they offer forgiveness so that they can move on in life after suffering a painful loss. But it is a process where you kind of examine your own anger and hate first, and then conclude that, well, maybe you prefer not to live with such such festering emotions that kind of eat you from the inside. And so you forgive, and thereby you're able to just let go and continue. But this brother didn't exactly ruminate on the subject. He immediately jumped out there and offered forgiveness because he thought it was expected of him. Many of us remain confounded by the forgiveness offered back in 2015 following the 9 people slain by the white supremacist Dylan Roof at Charleston's historically black Emmanuel AME Church. Dylan Roof walked into a Bible study meeting equipped with a loaded Glock and 8 magazines of bullets, a total of 88 rounds, a number neo-Nazis used to signify Heil Hitler. And he purposefully left 3 people alive so they could serve as witness to his carnage. Now, those survivors and the family members of the slain granted Dylan Roof forgiveness at the bond meeting right away. The relationship between religion and forgiveness remains baffling to me. A reporter for a Charleston newspaper, a woman by the name of Jennifer Berry Hughes, tried to make sense of all of this. She saw the issue as an amazing contest. That's actually not my word, not her word. An amazing contest between all that their faith taught them about forgiveness and the need to reconcile their own rage. And once again, it's the same dilemma. Confronted with a conflict to be resolved, do we act upon our instinct of revenge, or do we heed the call, so deeply embedded in our culture, do we heed the call to forgive? But the most salient point recorded by this reporter, Jennifer Berry Hughes, was what the mother of one of the slain sons, what she said immediately after forgiving so publicly. She said that if she didn't forgive the killer, she wouldn't go to heaven, and that's where she would find her baby boy once again. Hey God, I did your bidding, now do me a favor. Unite me with my little boy again. Quid pro quo. There are other contemporary forms of pushback to the whole concept of forgiveness. Philosophers like Jeffrey Murphy and Pamela Hiriani concede that forgiveness does offer an opportunity to let go of resentment, and it does move your life forward. But, and this is a huge consideration, they claim that you must only release your resentment for the right reasons. Wow, what's that mean? You must only release your resentment when repairing a relationship is even possible. Otherwise, why bother? Why go through the motions? You know, it would be like telling God on Yom Kippur, no, it's not worth forgiving this one. Ain't going to happen. It's not, don't count on me for any mercy. It just won't happen. Personally, I like giving forgiveness the benefit of the doubt. Perhaps something will change for the better. You never know. And forgiveness always seems the better choice compared to revenge. But in secular terms, when divine mercy in return for forgiveness is not a factor, we need to look at what it is that motivates us to forgive. Is it really a tool for conflict resolution? Or are we mostly interested in just moving forward without hanging on to our anger? Not hanging on, moving forward is not a bad option, but then we are forced to ask ourselves if we are really, truly honest when we call it forgiveness. There's such a deep association with forgiveness. Somehow it implies more than just, yeah, you're forgiven. I need to move on with my life. Forgiveness. What does that really mean? Now, those of us who were in a reading group last week trying to digest Colson Whitehead's book, The Nickel Boys, we had a tough time with the many references in that book to Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and his theories, his ideas. In particular, King said, "Throw us in jail and we will still love you. Bomb our homes and threaten our children, and as difficult as it is, we will still love you. Send your hooded perpetrators of violence into our communities after midnight hours, and drag us out onto some wayside road and beat us and leave us half dead, and we will still love you. But be ye assured that we will wear you down by our capacity to suffer, and one day we will win our freedom." Now, King, neither in that particular quote or throughout his life, King really said nothing about forgiveness. Instead, he speaks about love. Love even in the face of great suffering. He makes no mention of hate or anger or resentment or forgiveness so you can let go and move on. It's about a quality, it's about a depth of love that moves us and the world into an entirely different space. Now, this isn't romantic love to which most of us relate. It is agape. Agape love to which most of us, quite frankly, can't even begin to relate to because we can't even imagine it. But this love does represent a powerful response, for we need to ask, in the face of immense suffering, doesn't forgiveness really kind of become meaningless? Because it's impossible to forgive when it's a case of immense suffering. Perfect example, Simon Wiesenthal's novel, The Sunflower. A former Nazi prison guard on his deathbed in the hospital asked for a Jew to come to offer forgiveness. The Nazi explains what he has done. He expresses his remorse. And now the one thing that he wants, what he needs, is to die in peace and ask the Jew to forgive him. And it says in the book, "And the Jew walked silently out of the room." How could he possibly offer forgiveness? Now, King never advocated for forgiveness. He promoted instead a kind of love that defies common sense, a love beyond our human comprehension. Jesus said, "Love your enemy." He didn't say, "Forgive your enemy." Jesus said, loving those who love you, well, that's easy. Loving your enemy, that's a whole different trip. There's no quid pro quo, rather. Instead, Jesus says, you love your enemy, you become like a son of God. You love unconditionally. How hard is that? Love unconditionally, and only then will the world find peace. Only then can humankind be lifted above hate and fear and greed and exploitation. "I forgive you," said the young brother of the man killed by the female cop. He was not prepared to love her. "I forgive you," said the family of those slain in Charleston, South Carolina. Let me tell you, they were not prepared to love Dylan Roof. So is forgiveness a virtue? Well, I think most people would still contend that it is. And that's fine if it helps you become unstuck and you get to move on in your life. There's nothing wrong with that. But you never get to the other side of the conflict where life is truly transformed. I believe that forgiveness is a virtue only in that we are genetically programmed to be a vengeful people. I'd rather forgive and have God give me a gold star in the book of life than the alternative. But let us remember that forgiveness is considerably easier than radical love. In the religious world and in secular life, love, agape love, is the only thing that will truly move us and the world forward. Thank you, Sister Sonia. Let's close our service, turning our hymn books, please, to number 352. As we extinguish the chalice, let us close with these words by a dear Unitarian colleague, Bob Doss. He says, "For all who see God, may God go with you. For all who embrace life, may life return your affection. And for all who seek a right path, may a way be found and the courage to take it step by step." Amen. Two quick things. A reminder that the success of ratifying the Equal Rights Amendment depends on your signature. So be sure to sign it. And the success of the auction depends on you buying auction tickets. You can even buy some raffle tickets now. There's some great things that are being raffled off. And so take a cup of coffee and sign and buy and have a really good time. Let's break now. Coffee and conversation.